The signal came at 3 in the morning, ship time. Commander Lee Hyun was drinking coffee in his quarters aboard the patrol vessel Horizon when the communication officer burst through his door. The young woman's face was pale, her hands shaking, as she held out the datapad. "Sir, you need to see this," she said. "It's from the void." Lee almost dropped his coffee cup. Nothing came from the void. The void was a region of space that stretched across 50 light years, a place where ships went in and never came out. Even the most advanced races in the galaxy avoided it. They called it cursed, forbidden, a graveyard of civilizations. He took the datapad and listened to the recording. At first there was only static. Then beneath the noise he heard something that made his blood run cold. It was a voice, speaking in a language he had never heard before. The words were strange, alien, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was crying for help. "How long ago did we receive this?" Lee asked. 47 minutes ago. The signal is weak but continuous. It's definitely coming from inside the void, about 20 light years deep. Lee stared at the datapad. In his 12 years as a patrol commander, he had never heard of anyone receiving a transmission from the void. The region was known for swallowing signals, not sending them. "Send this to command immediately," he ordered, "and patch me through to Dr. Park Soo-jin at the Xenolinguistics Department on Earth." 3 hours later, Lee was speaking with Dr. Park via quantum communication. The elderly linguist looked tired but excited. She had been working on the transmission non-stop since receiving it. "Commander, this is extraordinary," she said, adjusting her glasses. "The language is ancient, older than any known civilization. It took me hours just to identify the linguistic family. Can you translate it?" "I'm working on it. But Commander, what I've decoded so far..." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Someone is trapped in there. Not just one person, but many. They've been calling for help for a very long time." Lee felt his heart skip a beat. "How long?" "Based on the linguistic patterns, I estimate the signal has been broadcasting for at least several thousand years. Maybe longer." The implications hit Lee like a physical blow. Thousands of years of crying for help and no one had heard them until now. Or maybe others had heard them, but no one had been brave enough to answer. "Keep working on the translation. Doctor, I'm going to contact the Galactic Council." Ambassador Cho Dong-woo was not happy to be woken up at 4 in the morning Earth time. As humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, he was used to dealing with crises, but this was different. "Commander, you're talking about the void," Cho said over the secure channel. "No one goes into the void. It's forbidden by galactic law." "It's not forbidden," Lee corrected. "It's just that every species that's tried to explore it has lost their ships." "Exactly. Which is why we don't go there." Lee felt his patience wearing thin. "Sir, there are people trapped in there, dying. They need help. People we don't know, from a civilization that may not even exist anymore." "Commander, I understand your concern, but we can't risk human lives on a signal that might be a trap. Trap that's been broadcasting for thousands of years. We don't know what's possible in the void. I'm sorry, Commander, but I cannot authorize any mission into that region." Lee ended the call and stared out the viewport of his ship. In the distance, he could see the edge of the void, a region of space that seemed to absorb light itself. It looked like a wound in the universe, dark and threatening, but somewhere in there, people were calling for help. Over the next 3 days, Lee watched as the galactic community debated the signal. The Valerian Empire, with their proud warrior traditions, declared that investigating ghost signals was beneath their honor. Their High Admiral Corvin announced that real warriors fought real enemies, not shadows in cursed space. The Nexus Collective, a federation of artificial intelligences and cybernetic species, ran probability calculations on the signal. Their result was clear: 98.7% chance of a trap, 1.2% chance of equipment malfunction, 0.1% chance of genuine distress call. They recommended ignoring the transmission. The ethereal dominion, ancient beings of pure energy, claimed to sense dark emanations from the void that counseled against any intervention. They spoke of disturbances in the cosmic balance and shadows that should not be awakened. Meanwhile, Dr. Park Soo-jin continued her work. She called Lee every few hours with updates, her translations becoming clearer each time. They call themselves the Forgotten Ones, she reported on the fourth day. They're trapped in something they call the place between places. Commander, they're not just asking for rescue. They're warning us. Warning us about what? Something is keeping them there. Something that feeds on civilizations. They say it's already consumed dozens of species, including... Her voice trailed off. Including what, Doctor? Including the expedition fleet sent to investigate the void over the past 10,000 years. Commander, every ship that's gone missing in there, they're all trapped together. The signal isn't just from one civilization. It's from all of them. Lee felt the blood drain from his face. Every Valyrian exploration fleet, every Nexus probe ship, every ethereal reconnaissance mission that had vanished into the void over the millennia, they were all still there, trapped and calling for help. Doctor, are you certain about this translation? As certain as I can be. Commander, there are millions of people trapped in that place. They've been waiting for someone brave enough to attempt a rescue. That night, Lee couldn't sleep. He stood at the viewport of his ship, staring into the void. He thought about his duty as a Starfleet officer, about the oath he had taken to protect and serve. He thought about his family back on Earth, his wife Min-jung and his daughter So-hee. Then he thought about the millions of people trapped in the darkness, people who had been crying for help for thousands of years while the galaxy's greatest civilizations found excuses to ignore them. He activated his personal communicator and sent a message to Earth Command. Request permission to investigate the void distress signal and attempt rescue of trapped survivors. The response came back within an hour. Permission denied. The void is considered too dangerous for human exploration. Return to normal patrol duties immediately. Lee stared at the message for a long moment. Then he deleted it and composed a new transmission. This one on an open channel that would reach every human ship in the sector. This is Commander Lee Hyun of the patrol ship Horizon. I am about to do something that Command won't approve of, and that the rest of the galaxy thinks is impossible. There are people trapped in the void, people who have been calling for help for thousands of years. I'm going to answer that call. He paused, looking once more at the dark region of space that had claimed so many ships. If my superiors are listening, I'm sorry for disobeying orders. If denied permission, I'm going anyway. Someone has to answer when people call for help. If no one else will, then humanity will. Lee closed the channel and turned to his crew. 23 men and women looked back at him, their faces reflecting his own determination. You heard the transmission, he said. You know what we're facing. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship can do so now. No questions asked, no black marks on your record. Not one person moved. Then let's go answer that call, Lee said. Theo. Horizon turned toward the void, its engines glowing bright against the darkness. Commander Lee Hyun's transmission spread through human space like wildfire. Within 6 hours of his broadcast, Earth's communication networks were overloaded with messages. The story of the trapped souls in the void reached every human colony, every space station, every ship in the outer rim. News reporters called it the biggest story in decades. Politicians demanded investigations. Military leaders argued in closed sessions, but while the powerful debated, ordinary humans began to act. Captain Kim Tae-ho was eating breakfast on his cargo freighter when he heard Lee's message. The 50-year-old spacer had spent 30 years, hauling supplies between the outer colonies. He had never considered himself a hero, just a man trying to make an honest living among the stars. After listening to the transmission 3 times, Kim walked to his ship's communication panel and sent a message to Commander Lee. This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the cargo vessel Morning Star. I volunteer to join your mission. My ship has extra cargo space that could carry supplies for rescued survivors. I'm changing course to meet you at the void's edge. Kim's wife, Soo-jin, found him packing emergency supplies in the cargo bay an hour later. You're really going to do this, she said. It wasn't a question. People are trapped in there, Soo-jin. They've been calling for help for thousands of years. But the experts say it's too dangerous. The government says it's suicide. Kim stopped packing and looked at his wife of 25 years. What would you want someone to do if it was us trapped in there? Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up a supply crate and helped him load it. I'm coming with you, she said. Sujin, no. It's too dangerous. If you're going, I'm going. We've been through everything together. I'm not stopping now. Similar conversations were happening across human space. On the mining station Kepler-7, engineer Yoon Mina volunteered her expertise in ship repair. She had designed some of the most advanced rescue systems in human space, and she knew they would need every advantage they could get. Ma'am, with respect, you're needed here, her supervisor said. You can't just abandon your post. There are people dying in the void, Mina replied. My job is to save lives. That's exactly what I'm doing. Dr. Jang Woo-sung was treating patients in a hospital on New Seoul when he saw Lee's message. The veteran medic had served in 3 different wars, treating wounded soldiers under impossible conditions. He knew that any rescue mission would need experienced medical personnel. I have to go, he told his wife that evening. If they're bringing people out of the void, they're going to need doctors. You're 68 years old, Woo-sung. You've done your service. Age doesn't matter when people need help. Besides, I've been to hell and back before. This is just another mission. The volunteers came from every corner of human space. Pilots and engineers, doctors and teachers, farmers and factory workers. Some were military veterans looking for more chance to serve. Others were civilians who had never left their home worlds before. What united them was a simple belief. When someone calls for help, you answer. Earth's government was in chaos. President Williams called emergency meetings with his advisors, trying to figure out how to respond to what the media was calling the Great Volunteer Movement. Sir, we have over 300 ships changing course toward the void, reported Defense Secretary Chen. Most of them are civilian vessels with no military escort or support. Can we stop them? Legally, no. They're all in international space and most of them are independent operators. We can't order civilian ships to change course without declaring martial law. What about Commander Lee? He's military. Yes, sir. But he's already in the outer rim. By the time we could get another ship to intercept him, he'll be at the void's edge. President Williams rubbed his temples. What are the other species saying about this? They think we've lost our minds, sir. The Valerian Empire watched the human mobilization with mixture of confusion and contempt. High Admiral Corvin sent a message to the Galactic Council expressing his thoughts. The humans demonstrate their typical lack of discipline, he declared. No proper military force would allow such chaos. When this mission fails, as it surely will, perhaps humanity will learn to respect the wisdom of their betters. But not all Valerians agreed. Young Captain Theron, stationed near human space, watched the volunteer ships with growing admiration. He had never seen an entire species mobilized not through government order, but through individual choice. The Kekermai Nexus Collective ran new calculations every hour as more human ships joined the mission. Their artificial intelligences struggled to understand the logic behind what they were seeing. The probability of mission success decreases with each additional vessel, announced Logic Prime, the collective's primary AI. Optimal mission parameters call for a maximum of 12 specialized ships with trained crews. The humans are sending hundreds of vessels with minimal coordination. Perhaps, suggested a smaller AI designated Curiosity 7, the humans are using variables we have not calculated. There are no variables we have not calculated, Logic Prime replied firmly. The humans are acting irrationally. But even as Logic Prime dismissed human actions as irrational, Curiosity 7 quietly began studying the psychological profiles of the volunteers. What it found puzzled the small AI greatly. The ethereal Dominion sent meditation fleets to the edge of the void, claiming they needed to monitor the spiritual disturbances caused by so many life forces approaching the cursed region. Their seers spoke of ripples in the cosmic balance and unprecedented alignments of will and purpose. Elder mystic Zorian, the most powerful of the ethereal seers, made a disturbing announcement to the Dominion's ruling council. "Something stirs in the deep places," he said. "The approach of so many willing souls has awakened forces that have slept for millennia. The humans do not know what they approach, but their very presence is changing the nature of the void itself." Meanwhile, the volunteer fleet continued to grow. By the third day, over 200 ships had joined Lee's mission. They came from every walk of human life. Merchant vessels, scientific research ships, mining barges, even converted passenger liners. Navigator Shinbo-ra was only 23 when she volunteered to join the mission. She had graduated from the Naval Academy just 2 years earlier and was serving aboard a survey ship near the rim. "Ma'am, I request transfer to Commander Lee's mission," she told her captain. "Bo-ra, you have a promising career ahead of you. Don't throw it away on a suicide mission." "Sir, my grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days on Earth when people would risk everything to save strangers. She said that's what made us human. I want to be part of something like that." The captain studied the young woman for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I'm too old for suicide missions, Navigator, but you have my permission to transfer. Make us proud." By the time the first volunteer ships reached the rendezvous point near the void's edge, they found Commander Lee's horizon surrounded by dozens of other vessels. The sight was unlike anything in galactic history, a fleet assembled not by governments or military commands, but by ordinary people answering a call for help. Lee opened a communication channel to address the assembled volunteers. "I want to be clear about what we're facing," he said. "The void has destroyed every ship that's entered it for thousands of years. We don't know what's waiting for us in there. Many of us may not come back." The channel was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Kim Tae-ho's voice crackled over the communication system. "Commander, we didn't come here because we thought it would be easy. We came because it was right." "That's correct," added Engineer Yoon Mina. "The Nexus Collective says, we have only a 2.7% chance of success. Then we'll be the lucky 2.7%, replied pilot Han So-young from her modified racing ship. Laughter echoed across the communication channels. Lee felt a warm feeling in his chest as he looked at the displays showing all the volunteer ships. Humanity had answered the call not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. "All ships prepare for final systems check," Lee announced. "We enter the void in 6 hours." As the volunteer fleet made their preparations, monitoring stations throughout the galaxy watched in amazement. Never before had any species attempted such a massive rescue mission into the most dangerous region of space. On Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin worked frantically to complete her translation of the distress signal. What she had discovered in the latest transmissions filled her with both hope and terror. The trapped souls were still alive, but whatever held them was growing stronger. She sent her final report to Commander Lee, just as his fleet prepared to enter the void. "Commander, the entity holding them feeds on despair and isolation. But there's something else in the signal now, something that wasn't there before. Hope. Your approach has given them hope for the first time in millennia. That may be the key to their survival." Lee read the message and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Millions of trapped souls were counting on them. The galaxy was watching, and somewhere in the darkness ahead an ancient evil waited. But as he looked at his fleet of volunteers, Lee felt something he hadn't expected. Confidence. They were just ordinary humans, but they had come together for something extraordinary. "All ships," he announced. "This is Commander Lee. Thank you for answering the call. Let's go B." The first thing Navigator Shinbo-ra noticed when they crossed into the void was the silence. Not just the normal quiet of space, but something deeper. It felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. The stars vanished behind them as if they had never existed. Ahead lay only darkness so complete it seemed solid. "Navigation systems are failing," Bo-ra reported from her station aboard the lead scout ship. "I'm reading gravitational anomalies that shouldn't be possible. Commander, the laws of physics seem different in here." Commander Lee Hyun listened to similar reports from across the volunteer fleet. Ships that had worked perfectly for decades were now struggling with basic systems. Communication became spotty. Sensors showed readings that made no sense. "All ships, Reduce speed to quarter impulse, Lee ordered. Stay in formation and keep visual contact with your nearest neighbor. Chief Engineer Lim Jae-sung was fighting a losing battle with his ship's engines. The veteran engineer had worked on starships for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. The power conduits are fluctuating, he reported to his captain. It's like something is draining energy directly from our systems. I'm rerouting power through backup channels, but I don't know how long this will hold. Similar problems plagued every ship in the fleet. The void wasn't just empty space. It was actively hostile to technology, to order, to life itself. But the humans adapted. When their advanced navigation systems failed, they used basic stellar positioning. When their communication arrays went down, they used simple radio frequencies. When their sensors couldn't penetrate the darkness, they relied on their instincts and experience. This is how our ancestors explored the oceans, Captain Kim Tai-ho told his crew as they manually adjusted their ship's heading. They didn't have computers or satellites, they had courage and determination. 3 days into the void, they found the first graveyard. Pilot Han So-young was leading a reconnaissance flight in her modified racing ship when she spotted something glinting in the darkness. As she approached, her breath caught in her throat. "Commander, you need to see this," she transmitted back to the fleet. It was a Valyrian battleship, one of their most advanced designs. The massive vessel floated dead in space, its hull intact, but its lights dark. Through the viewports, Han could see the frozen forms of the crew still at their stations. "That's the V's Pride of Valor," identified Captain Kim, who had studied galactic ship designs. She disappeared 15 years ago with over 3,000 crew members. As the fleet moved deeper into the void, they found more ships. A Nexus research station, its artificial intelligence cores silent and cold. An ethereal meditation vessel, its energy-based crew somehow drained of their very essence. Dozens of exploration ships from every major civilization, all perfectly preserved but completely lifeless. "It's like a museum of failures," whispered engineer Yoon Mina as she studied the dead vessels through her ship's telescopes. But navigator Bora noticed something the others missed. As their small fleet moved through the graveyard of ships, she began to feel something strange. A tingling in her mind, like a voice trying to speak but not knowing how to form words. "Commander," she reported carefully, "I think something is trying to communicate with us." "What kind of something?" "I don't know. It's not like any signal we've ever received. It's more like feelings, emotions without words." Dr. Jang Woo-sung, monitoring the crew's vital signs from the medical bay, noticed something interesting. Unlike the previous expeditions, whose crews had apparently died instantly upon entering the void, the humans were showing signs of adaptation. "Our brain activity is changing," he reported. "The crew members who've been in the void longest are developing new neural pathways. It's as if our minds are learning to process information in ways we never could before." On the 4th day, the whispers began. At first, crew members reported hearing faint voices speaking in languages they didn't recognize. The voices seemed to come from inside their heads, carrying emotions of sadness, fear, and desperate hope. "Can hear them," Bora told Commander Lee during their daily briefing. "The trapped souls Dr. Park told us about. They're trying to guide us, but they're afraid. They say others have tried to help before, but the void consumed them too." "What makes us different?" Bora paused, her eyes distant as she listened to voices only she could hear clearly. "They say we're the first ones who didn't give up when things got difficult. Every other species turned back or fell silent when their technology failed. But we keep going." The breakthrough came on the 5th day, when Bora made a startling discovery. "Commander, I don't think the void is evil," she announced during the morning briefing. "I think it's lonely." "Lonely?" The whispers are getting clearer. "The void is the first consciousness that ever existed in the universe. It's billions of years old, and it's been alone for most of that time. When civilizations developed space travel and approached its borders, it tried to preserve them. But it doesn't understand that preservation without growth is another form of death." Chief Engineer Lim nodded thoughtfully. "That would explain why the other ships are intact but lifeless. It's trying to keep them safe by stopping time around them." But why can we still function when the others couldn't? Bora smiled sadly. Because we keep moving forward even when everything seems hopeless. The void recognizes something in us that it's never seen before. A refusal to accept that some things can't be fixed. As if responding to her words, the darkness around the fleet began to shift. Patterns of light started to appear, not bright enough to see clearly, but enough to give a sense of direction. It's showing us the way, Bora whispered in amazement. The fleet followed the lights deeper into the void, past more graveyards of ships through regions where space itself seemed to bend and twist. Some crew members reported seeing impossible things, stars that sang, planets made of crystallized time, nebulae that moved with purpose. But they pressed on, guided by Bora's growing ability to communicate with the ancient consciousness and driven by their determination to answer the call for help they had received. On the seventh day, they reached the edge of something that shouldn't exist, a barrier made of what looked like solidified space-time, stretching in all directions as far as their sensors could detect. That's it, Bora announced, her voice filled with awe. That's where they're trapped. The ancients, the lost expeditions, everyone who's ever been consumed by the void. They're all behind that barrier, in a place between dimensions. Commander, Lee stared at the impossible wall before them. Can we get through? I don't know. But Commander, they're calling to us. After thousands of years of silence, they finally have hope again. They believe we can succeed where everyone else failed. Lee looked around at his crew, ordinary humans who had volunteered for an impossible mission. Engineer Lim was already studying the barrier's structure. Dr. Zhang was monitoring everyone's health. Pilot Han was testing the responsiveness of her ship's controls. Captain Kim was coordinating with the other vessels in the fleet. Each of them was afraid. Each of them knew they might not survive. But none of them suggested turning back. All ships, prepare for final approach, Lee announced, to the fleet. Whatever's on the other side of that barrier, we're going to find it, and we're going to bring our people home. As the human fleet approached the dimensional barrier, the ancient consciousness of the void watched with something it had never felt before. Hope. For the first time in billions of years, it was no longer alone. These strange, stubborn creatures had shown it something new. They had shown it that sometimes the impossible was just another word for not yet figured out. The dimensional barrier felt like touching liquid starlight. Navigator Shin Bo-Ra pressed her hand against the wall of solidified space-time and gasped. Images flooded her mind. Vast cities floating in impossible geometries, beings of pure thought, walking through gardens of crystallized time. And at the center of it all, a voice older than galaxies calling out in desperate loneliness. I can see them, she whispered to Commander Lee. The ancients. They're alive, but they're fading. This prison is slowly draining their essence. Through the barrier, Bo-Ra could sense the first civilization that had ever reached for the stars. They had been explorers, scientists, philosophers, who had unlocked the secrets of the universe itself. When the void had first encountered them 50,000 years ago, it had been overwhelmed by their beauty and complexity. In its desperate need to preserve something so wonderful, the void had created a perfect prison. Dr. Ryu Jin-Ah, the fleet's chief physicist, joined Bo-Ra at the barrier. The middle-aged scientist had spent her career studying dimensional mechanics, but nothing had prepared her for this. The mathematics are impossible, she muttered, running her instruments along the barrier's surface. This isn't just a wall, it's a fold in reality itself. They're not trapped behind it. They're trapped inside it, existing in a space between dimensions. Can we break through? Asked Commander Lee. Break through? No, but maybe. Dr. Ryu paused, her mind racing through calculations that would have driven lesser scientists mad. Maybe we can create a doorway, a stable portal that would allow them to step from their dimensional prison into our reality. First speaker Kang Hyun-woo, the fleet's chief diplomat, approached the barrier carefully. As the human fleet's representative, it would be his job to make first contact with the ancients. But he had never imagined trying to communicate with beings trapped in folded spacetime. How do we even talk to them? He asked. Bora placed her hand back on the barrier. Through me, the void has been teaching me how to communicate across dimensions. I can serve as a translator. The first contact was unlike anything in galactic history. Bora pressed both hands against the barrier and opened her mind completely. The sensation was overwhelming. Thousands of voices speaking at once, each carrying the weight of 50 millennia of imprisonment. But one voice rose above the others, ancient and tired, but filled with sudden hope. "Young ones," the voice said through Bora, "you have come at last. We had begun to fear that courage had died with us in this place." Speaker Kang stepped forward. "We received your distress call. We've come to help." "Help?" The ancient's voice carried bitter laughter. "Many have tried, young speaker. The graveyard ships around you are proof of that. The void means well, but its love is the love of a collector. It preserves what it treasures by removing it from the flow of time and change. But you're still alive," Bora pointed out. "Alive, yes. Living, no. We exist in a moment frozen between heartbeats, watching our civilization slowly fade as our essence is drained to maintain this prison. We are becoming shadows of ourselves, memories of what we once were." Dr. Ryu stepped forward with her calculations. "I've been studying the barrier's structure. The energy requirements to maintain it are enormous. Where does the power come from?" The ancient's voice grew sad. "From us. From all who have been preserved here. Every ship that enters the void, every crew that tries to help, becomes part of the power source that maintains our prison. The void believes it is showing us kindness by allowing us to live forever. It does not understand that existence without purpose is just another form of death." Captain Song Minho, who commanded one of the fleet's larger rescue vessels, asked the question they were all thinking. "How many of you are there?" "Millions," came the reply. "Not just our people, but everyone the void has tried to preserve. Over the millennia. Exploration crews from every major civilization. Scientists, diplomats, warriors, artists, all trapped in this place between places." The magnitude of the situation hit the human fleet like a physical blow. They weren't just trying to rescue one civilization. They were trying to save everyone who had ever been lost to the void. But even as the challenge grew larger, so did their determination. "We'll find a way," Commander Lee announced firmly. "No one gets left behind." The ancient's voice carried amazement. "You speak with such certainty, young commander. Do you not understand the forces you face? The void is older than your sun, more powerful than your entire civilization. It has turned good intentions into eternal suffering for 50,000 years. "Then it's time for something new," replied Captain Kim Tae-ho from his position with the main fleet. "We humans have a saying, impossible just means we haven't figured out how yet." What followed was the most complex rescue planning in galactic history. Dr. Ryu worked around the clock, using the fleet's combined computational power to model the dimensional barrier's structure. Her findings were both encouraging and terrifying. "The good news is that the barrier can be breached," she reported to the assembled commanders. "The bad news is that doing so will require a massive energy discharge that could destabilize local space-time for several light-years in every direction." "What would that mean for us, Won?" asked engineer Yoon Mina. "Best case scenario, we create a temporary portal and extract some of the trapped beings before the barrier reforms. Worst case scenario, we create a cascade failure that destroys several star systems and kills everyone in the process." The silence that followed was deafening. "What are the odds of success?" asked Captain Song. Dr. Ryu's voice was barely a whisper. "Less than 1%, and that's assuming everything goes perfectly." But even as the odds mounted against them, reports were coming in from throughout human space. Word of their mission had spread, and support was building. Volunteer supply ships were heading toward the void, carrying everything from medical equipment to spare parts. Research stations were dedicating their entire computational capacity to helping Dr. Ryu refine her calculations. Even civilian engineers were sending design modifications that might help. More importantly, Navigator Bora reported that the trapped beings themselves were contributing to the solution. The ancients have had 50,000 years to study this prison from the inside, she explained during a briefing. They understand things about dimensional mechanics that our science hasn't even dreamed of. They're sharing their knowledge through me. The solution, when it finally came, was typically human in its audacity. We can't break the barrier, Dr. Ryu announced to the fleet. But we can trick it. The void maintains the prison by keeping the trapped beings in a state between dimensions. If we can convince it that they want to be preserved differently, it might release them voluntarily. How do we convince a cosmic entity that's been doing the same thing for 50,000 years to change its mind? Asked Speaker Kang. Bora smiled, her eyes distant as she communicated with the ancients. By showing it something it's never seen before. The void has always acted alone, preserving what it loves by isolating it. But we've shown it something new, the power of working together, of accepting help, of being part of something larger than yourself. You want to teach the void about cooperation? Not just cooperation, community. The void has been lonely for billions of years. We're offering it something it's never had. Friends who will stay with it by choice, not because they're trapped. The plan was insane. It was dangerous. It required them to trust their lives to an ancient cosmic entity that had been accidentally destroying civilizations for millennia. It was also the most human thing they could possibly do. As the fleet prepared for the most ambitious rescue attempt in galactic history, monitoring stations throughout known space watched in amazement. The other major civilizations sent observation ships, convinced they were about to witness the greatest disaster in galactic history. But on Earth, in the small office where it had all begun, Dr. Park Soo-jin smiled as she watched the reports coming in. She had spent her life studying ancient languages and dead civilizations. For the first time, she was seeing one brought back to life. They're going to do it, she whispered to herself. Somehow they're actually going to do it. In the void, Commander Lee looked at his fleet of volunteers, ordinary humans who had answered an impossible call for help. Tomorrow, they would attempt something that violated every known law of physics and common sense. But tonight, for the first time in 50,000 years, the ancient darkness was filled with hope. The first volunteer was Navigator Shin Bora. I'll do it, she announced during the final mission briefing. I've been communicating with the void and the ancients longest. My neural pathways are already adapted to dimensional communication. I should be the primary anchor point. Dr. Ryujina looked up from her calculations with concern. Bora, you understand what this means? The process will burn out your nervous system. The best case scenario is that you'll be permanently changed. Worst case, I die helping millions of people escape from 50,000 years of imprisonment. Bora finished calmly. That's not the worst way to go. Commander Lee studied the young navigator who had become essential to their mission. At 23, she was the youngest member of the senior staff, but her ability to communicate across dimensions made her irreplaceable. We need 12 volunteers total, Lee said. 12 anchor points to create a stable dimensional bridge. Bora will be primary, but we need 11 others. Captain Song Min-ho raised his hand immediately. Count me in. And me, added Engineer Lim Jae-sung. Within minutes, they had more volunteers than they needed. 47 crew members from across the fleet stepped forward, each willing to sacrifice themselves for the rescue mission. The selection process was heartbreaking. Dr. Jang Woo-sung had to evaluate each volunteer's neural compatibility with dimensional bridging. Only those with the right psychological and physical profiles could serve as anchor points without dying instantly. Among those selected were Captain Kim Tae-ho, whose decades of space experience gave him the mental flexibility needed for dimensional work, and Engineer Yoon Mina, whose technical background would help her maintain the bridge's stability. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Admiral Park Ji-hoon arrived with a reinforcement fleet just as the preparations were beginning. The veteran commander had defied direct orders from Earth Command to bring additional ships and supplies. I couldn't let you attempt this alone, he told Lee. Besides, Earth Command is dealing with a small mutiny right now. Half the fleet has volunteered to come help, orders or not. Park brought something even more valuable than ships, News from Earth. The entire planet is watching, he reported. Dr. Park Soo-jin has been working with teams from every human university to refine the rescue plan. She's discovered something important about the Void's nature. The discovery changed everything. The Void isn't just lonely, Dr. Park had transmitted to the fleet. It's dying. It's been using its own life force to maintain the dimensional prison for 50,000 years. Every rescue attempt that failed drained more of its energy. It's preserved all these civilizations at the cost of its own existence. This revelation reached Navigator Bora just as she was preparing for the anchor point procedure. When she shared the information with the Void through their dimensional link, she felt something she had never experienced before. The cosmic entity's surprise. "You would help me as well?" The Void's presence asked her, its mental voice filled with wonder. "Of course," Bora replied. "You've been trying to do something good. You just needed better friends to help you figure out how." What happened next shocked everyone, including the ancients who had been trapped for millennia. The Void began to help. Instead of resisting their rescue attempt, the ancient consciousness started actively assisting them. The dimensional barrier became more permeable. The gravitational anomalies that had been plaguing their ship stabilized. Most importantly, the energy drain that should have killed the anchor volunteers was reduced to manageable levels. "It's sharing the load," Dr. Ryu announced in amazement as she watched her instruments. "The Void is using its own remaining life force to supplement our anchor points. This might actually work." The rescue itself was unlike anything in recorded history. As the 12 human volunteers linked their minds to create the dimensional bridge, reality itself seemed to bend around them. Space twisted into impossible shapes. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. Through it all, the volunteers held firm, their consciousness serving as guideposts for the trapped souls to follow. Navigator Bora felt her awareness expand beyond anything she had ever imagined. She could sense every trapped being in the dimensional prison. Ancients whose wisdom spanned millennia. Valyrian warriors who had died with honor intact. Nexus AIs still calculating solutions to problems from ages past. Ethereal mystics whose spirits had remained unbroken despite their imprisonment. "I can see them all," she reported through the communication link. "They're ready. They want to come home." The first to emerge was an ancient whose name translated roughly as Seeker of Distant Stars. The being stepped through the dimensional portal looking exactly as it had 50,000 years ago, but its eyes carried the weight of all that time. "Young ones," it said to the assembled humans, "you have done something that we thought impossible. You have taught an ancient being that preservation and growth are not enemies but partners." More followed. Hundreds, then thousands of rescued beings stepped through the portal. Many were ancients, but there were also crews from the various expeditions that had been lost over the millennia. Captain Theron of the Valyrian Empire emerged carrying the battle standards of his ship, his crew following in perfect formation, despite their long imprisonment. The Nexus AI designated Logic Prime materialized in a new robotic body, immediately beginning to process the experiences of its captivity. Ethereal mystics flowed through the portal like living light, their joy at freedom creating rainbow patterns in space. But the most moving moment came when the crew of a human exploration ship emerged from the portal. The vessel had been lost 30 years ago during humanity's first attempts to explore the galaxy's outer rim. Commander Morrison reporting, the ship's captain said to Admiral Park. "Sorry for being late, sir. We got a bit turned around." The rescue continued for hours. Each being that emerged made the portal more stable, as if their freedom was healing the very fabric of space-time. The Void's participation in the process had changed everything, turning what should have been a desperate gamble into a carefully orchestrated liberation. But as the last of the trapped beings stepped through the portal, Navigator Bora felt something troubling through her connection to the Void. "It's fading," she announced with alarm. "The Void gave too much of its life force to help us. It's dying." The ancient consciousness that had existed since the universe's birth was spending its last energy to ensure the success of the rescue. After billions of years of lonely existence, it was choosing to die in an act of friendship. "No," Bora said firmly. Not after all this. We're not losing anyone else. What she did next violated every protocol, every safety procedure, and every rational thought. But it was entirely human in its audacity. Instead of severing her connection to the void as the procedure demanded, Bora opened her mind completely to the dying entity. The other anchor volunteers, seeing what she was doing, followed her lead. "If you die, we die with you," she told the void. "We're in this together now." The effect was immediate and unprecedented. Instead of dying, the void began to stabilize, drawing strength not from the trapped beings it had preserved, but from the freely given connection to the human volunteers. For the first time in its existence, the ancient consciousness was not alone by choice, but by invitation. Dr. Ryu watched her instruments in amazement as the readings stabilized. The dimensional stress is normalizing. The portal is becoming permanent. The void isn't just surviving, it's becoming something new. Indeed, what had once been a region of space that consumed everything that entered it was transforming into something unprecedented. A stable dimensional gateway, maintained not by imprisonment and isolation, but by cooperation and friendship. The rescued ancients watched this transformation with wonder. "In 50,000 years of imprisonment," Seeker of Distant Stars observed, "we learned much about the nature of existence. But you have taught us something new, that sometimes the greatest wisdom is simply being willing to help." As the rescue fleet prepared to leave the void, now transformed into humanity's greatest ally instead of the galaxy's greatest threat, Navigator Bo-Ra remained permanently changed by her experience. She existed now partially in both dimensions, serving as an eternal bridge between humanity and the ancient consciousness they had saved. "Will you be all right?" Commander Lee asked her. Bo-Ra smiled, her eyes reflecting depths that spanned dimensions. "Better than all right. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The volunteer fleet emerged from the void carrying nearly 2 million rescued beings, and accompanied by something no one had expected: the void itself, now mobile and curious to explore. The galaxy it had watched from a distance for so long. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the rescue, the galaxy was a different place. Ambassador Cho Dong-woo stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, watching as representatives from every major civilization debated the implications of what humanity had accomplished. The chamber buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages, but the topic was always the same: how had the humans succeeded where everyone else had failed? "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't gone?" asked Captain Kim, breaking the comfortable silence. "Every day," Lee replied. "But then I remember that wondering what if is less important than asking what now." As if summoned by their conversation, a priority message arrived from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. Another distress signal had been detected, this one from a region of space that had been thought completely empty. Lee read the message and smiled. "Unknown civilization, trapped in a collapsing pocket universe. Estimated survival time, 72 hours. All conventional rescue methods deemed impossible." "Sounds familiar," laughed Dr. Jang, who had joined them for the anniversary celebration. Signal received and acknowledged. Lee transmitted back to the monitoring station. "Rescue fleet, deploying immediately." As alarms began to sound throughout human space, calling volunteers for another impossible mission, Lee looked once more at his gathered friends. They were all older now, marked by their experiences in the void, but their eyes still held the same determination that had driven them to answer that first call for help. "Well, team," he said, "looks like someone needs us again." "Then let's go," Bo-Ra replied, her voice echoing strangely as it crossed dimensions. "After all, when someone calls for help, we answer." The volunteer fleet that assembled this time was even larger than the original Void mission. Ships from every species in the galaxy joined the human vessels, their crews united by a common understanding: no one should face the impossible alone. As the massive rescue fleet prepared to depart, children on worlds throughout the galaxy looked up at the stars with new hope. They had grown up hearing stories of the Void rescue, tales of ordinary people who had accomplished extraordinary things simply by refusing to give up. On Valeria, young warriors trained not just in combat, but in cooperation and sacrifice. On the Nexus worlds, AIs calculated not just probabilities of success, but probabilities of helping others. In the ethereal realm, mystics meditated on the connections between all living things, and in the depths of space, monitoring stations maintained constant watch for new distress signals, knowing that somewhere among the stars help was always on the way. The Void, now a mobile friend to all civilizations, had learned to recognize the patterns of genuine distress calls. When it detected the new signal from the collapsing pocket universe, it immediately began adjusting local spacetime to create a stable corridor for the rescue fleet. "Thank you," Admiral Lee transmitted to his ancient ally as the fleet began its journey. "Thank you," the Void replied through Bora's dimensional link, "for teaching me that being alone is a choice, not a necessity." As the rescue fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Earth's deep space monitoring stations continued their eternal vigil. New signals arrived every day. Lost colonies, stranded explorers, civilizations facing disasters that seemed insurmountable. And from the blue-green world that had once been considered a backwater planet on the galaxy's rim, the response was always the same. Signal received, help is on the way. The message that had started it all, that first desperate call from the Void, had changed more than just the fate of those who were trapped. It had changed the very nature of galactic civilization, transforming a collection of separate species into a true community united by a simple principle. When someone calls for help, you answer. Humanity had heard the Void's call for courage, and in answering it, had taught the entire galaxy what it meant to be truly brave. Not the courage of conquest or domination, but the courage of compassion, the strength that comes from standing up for others even when the odds are impossible. And in the depths of space, where new crises arose every day and new voices called out for help, that courage continued to answer, one rescue at a time, one impossible mission after another. Because that's what heroes do. They show up when needed, they refuse to accept defeat, and they prove that no situation is truly hopeless as long as someone cares enough to try. The Void had called for courage, and humanity had been first to respond. The galaxy would never be the same. The end. The mathematical impossibility of their success continues to baffle our best analysts, announced Logic Prime, the Nexus AI who had himself been rescued from the Void. By every calculation, the mission should have resulted in total annihilation. Instead, it achieved perfect success and created new possibilities for dimensional travel. High Admiral Corvin of the Valerian Empire stood to address the assembly. The proud warrior had been humbled by the rescue of his own crews, men and women, who had been trapped in the Void for decades. "The humans showed us something we had forgotten," he said, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "True honor is not found in victory over others, but in service to others. My own people owe their lives to beings they had dismissed as inferior." Elder Mystic Zorian of the Ethereal Dominion added his thoughts. "In our meditations, we had always sought transcendence through rising above material concerns. The humans have shown us that the greatest transcendence comes from embracing our connections to others, not abandoning them. But the real changes were happening outside the council chambers." Commander Lee Hyun stood on the observation deck of the newly christened starship Voyager of Hope, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first Void-capable vessel. The ship was a joint project involving rescued ancients, human engineers, and even the Void itself, which had become fascinated with the concept of collaborative creation. "She's beautiful," said Captain Kim Tae-ho, joining Lee at the viewport. The veteran spacer had been promoted to captain of humanity's new exploration fleet, tasked with seeking out other civilizations in need of help. "The ancients say she can travel between dimensions as easily as crossing a room," Lee replied. "They want to share everything they learned during their imprisonment. 50,000 years of forced observation gave them insights into the universe that no one else possesses. Through their dimensional connection, Navigator Shin Bo-Ra had become humanity's primary liaison with both the ancients and the Void. She spent her time helping translate technologies and concepts that had no equivalent in normal spacetime. The Void wants to help explore regions of space that have been inaccessible to normal ships, she reported during their weekly briefing. There are entire civilizations living in pocket dimensions, survivors of cosmic disasters who thought they were alone. The Void can sense them now, and it wants to reunite them with the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Ryujina had become the galaxy's leading expert on dimensional mechanics, working closely with ancient scientists to develop new theories about the nature of reality. Her research station, built partially in normal space and partially in the Void's dimensional realm, was producing discoveries that revolutionized physics on a daily basis. We're learning that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, she explained to a gathering of scientists from every major civilization. The boundaries we thought were absolute are actually invitations to explore new possibilities. The social changes were just as dramatic as the technological ones. Engineer Yoon Mina found herself leading integration programs, helping rescued beings adapt to life in a galaxy that had changed significantly during their imprisonment. The work was challenging but rewarding, as each rescued individual brought unique perspectives and experiences. The Valyrian crews who were trapped for decades have become incredibly patient and thoughtful, she reported. The Nexus AIs have developed new forms of creativity from their enforced isolation. The ethereal mystics have gained a deeper appreciation for material existence. Everyone has grown in unexpected ways. Dr. Jang Woo-sung established medical facilities specifically designed to help beings who had experienced dimensional displacement. The work was cutting edge, combining human medicine with ancient knowledge and void-enhanced healing techniques. We're not just treating physical effects, he explained to his staff. Dimensional displacement affects every aspect of a being's existence. We're learning to heal souls as well as bodies. The most significant change of all was humanity's new role in galactic affairs. President Williams, who had initially opposed the rescue mission, now found himself fielding requests from civilizations across the galaxy. Everyone wanted humanity's help with their own impossible problems. We've received over 300 requests for assistance this month alone, reported Defense Secretary Chen during their weekly briefing. Stranded colonies, lost exploration fleets, civilizations trapped by natural disasters. Everyone seems to think we specialize in impossible rescues, don't we? Williams asked with a smile. The truth was, humanity had become the galaxy's emergency responders. When faced with situations that seemed hopeless, other civilizations now called for human assistance. And humanity, staying true to the principles that had driven the Void rescue, always answered. Captain Song Min-ho commanded T.